All right, welcome in everyone. We're diving deep today. And guess what? We're going after a team that I think gets a little overshadowed.
Hmm. Overshadowed. I'm intrigued. Who are we talking about?
The Detroit Pistons, baby. Back-to-back NBA champs, 89 and 90.
Oh, the bad boys.
Uh,
Now, those guys, they knew how to make a statement, didn't they?
Absolutely. They weren't just tough, they were game changers. Like their style, their intensity, the whole league had to take notice.
You know, it's funny, you look back at that team, and yeah, they had some serious talent, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just raw talent that got them those championships. It was something more, like a perfect storm of factors.
Right, right. And when I think about those championship years, one thing that jumps out at me is how consistent that roster was. You had Isaiah Thomas running the show, Joe Dumars with that ice in his veins,
Yeah.
Bill Laimbeer, the enforcer, and Dennis Rodman just gobbling up rebounds like a monster.
And that consistency, that's huge, especially back then when trades were happening left and right.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Keeping that core group together, it allowed them to develop real chemistry. They weren't just playing together, they were growing together, refining their style.
And their style was, well, let's be honest, pretty unique, right? Especially on the defensive end.
Oh, absolutely. That defense was suffocating. Opponents, they had nightmares about facing those Pistons.
And speaking of defense, we got to talk about the Jordan rules, right?
Ah, yes. The Jordan rules. It's almost legendary at this point.
It's like a whole chapter in basketball history.
Exactly. And for good reason. They were
Yeah.
specifically designed to to try to shut down the one and only Michael Jordan.
Which is crazy to even think about, right? Like, how do you even begin to contain a force like Jordan?
Right. But they had a plan, a very specific plan. Double teaming him every time he touched the ball, playing him physical, forcing him to pass instead of taking those iconic shots.
And the thing is, it worked.
It did. Think about it. They knocked the Bulls out of the playoffs 3 years in a row.
That's a statement if I've ever heard one.
It is. And it wasn't just about brute force either.
Yeah.
Though there was plenty of that, don't get me wrong.
You're-
There was a system behind it, a calculated system. And that, to me, that speaks volumes about Coach Chuck Daly's genius and the team's commitment to defense.
So, okay, we've got this defensive powerhouse. They're shutting down some of the biggest names in the league. And then in 89, they go up against the LA Lakers in the final.
Oh, man. The Lakers,
The dynasty.
the team to beat.
It's like David versus Goliath, isn't it?
And you know what? David won. The Lakers were dealing with some injuries.
Magic being one of them, right?
Huge injury. But still, you can't take away from what the Pistons did defensively. They completely shut down that high-scoring Lakers offense.
They held them under 100 points in every single game of the series.
Every single game. It was a sweep.
A sweep. Did anyone see that coming?
Not many, I'd say. And the thing is, it wasn't just a defensive win. It was a total team effort. Joe Dumars, Mr. Cool and Collected, he went off offensively, earned himself the Finals MVP.
Okay, so they take down the Lakers in 89. They're riding high. What happens in 1990?
Back in the finals.
Again.
Against Clyde Drexler and the Portland Trail Blazers. And this series really highlights another aspect of their success, their depth.
Oh, like coming off the bench?
Exactly. You remember Vinnie Johnson?
The microwave.
The microwave. That nickname, it's perfect, isn't it? He could come off the bench and just heat up the game in an instant. And in Game 5, series on the line.
Don't tell me he hit the game winner.
He did, with .7 seconds left on the clock. Talk about clutch.
Wow, what a play.
Really sums up this team. Their clutch performances, their never-give-up attitude. But to really understand their legacy, I think we need to go beyond that bad boys label.
Yeah, I was going to say, that label, it's iconic, but it also kind of overshadows everything else they were about, right?
Absolutely. They were tough, no doubt. But they were also incredibly versatile. They played as a unit. There was depth to their game. It wasn't just about being bullied.
Right. It was about being a well-rounded, well-coached team.
Exactly.
So we've got back-to-back championships, this incredibly unique playing style that changed the NBA. But there's another piece to this puzzle, isn't there? The rivalries.
Oh, yeah, the rivalries. You can't talk about the Pistons without talking about the Celtics, the Lakers, and, of course, the Bulls. Each one adds a whole new layer to their story.
It's like each rivalry tells a different part of their journey, right? So where do you think we should start?
Well, if you're thinking timeline, I think it makes sense to start with the Celtics. Before the championships, before all that, the Pistons had to go through them.
The Celtics with Larry Bird, talk about a final boss.
Right. They were the dominant force in the East. And Those battles back in the mid-'80s, man, some of the most intense physical games the league had ever seen. It was real clash of styles, the finesse of the Celtics, bird shooting versus that in-your-face Pistons defense, that relentless hustle.
So how did the Pistons finally break through? Because it took a while, right?
It did. A few years, a few hard-fought battles. But in 1988, they finally did it. They beat the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals.
That must have been huge for them mentally.
It was a turning point. It was a sign that their style, their toughness, could actually win championships.
And then, of course, there's the Bulls. That's like a Shakespearean drama, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. You've got these bad boy Pistons. They were Michael Jordan's biggest obstacle before the Bulls dynasty took off.
Right. Those playoff series in the late 80s, the tension, you could cut it with a knife.
Oh, absolutely. On and off the court. And, those Jordan rules, they were designed to contain Jordan, and they worked.
3 straight years, they knocked the Bulls out of the playoffs. I can't imagine the frustration for Jordan.
Must have been intense.
Yeah.
But I think it also fueled him. But think about what that says about the Pistons. Their ability to strategize, adapt, and execute that strategy flawlessly, that's impressive.
So we got the Celtics, we've got the Bulls, and of course we've got the Lakers. I mean, they had to be a major hurdle as well, right?
Oh, yeah, a huge hurdle. They faced off in the '88 and '89 finals, two powerhouse teams going head-to-head.
And the Pistons lost in '88, right? That had to sting.
It did. It did. It went to 7 games, down to the wire. But they learned from it. They came back in '89, and, well, we already talked about it. They swept the Lakers. They basically ended the Showtime era.
What a comeback story.
It's incredible.
So we've got legendary rivalries, back-to-back championships, a playing style that was completely unique and changed the game. I mean, how do you even begin to sum up the Pistons' legacy?
It's multifaceted, that's for sure. I see them as a bridge between eras. You had that Lakers-Celtics dominance in the '80s, then the Bulls dynasty in the '90s. The Pistons, they kind of proved that you could win with defense, with toughness, with this relentless team-first mentality. They might not have always been pretty to watch, but man, were they effective. And their impact, honestly, I think you can still feel it in the NBA today.
I mean, just look at the individual accolades. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Hall of Famers.
Exactly. And Coach Chuck Daly, the mastermind behind it all, he goes on to coach the 1992 Dream Team, the first Olympic team with NBA players.
Wow. Talk about leaving a mark.
They did. And that bad boys label, it might have some negative connotations.
Yeah.
But there's no denying that they are one of the most successful and impactful teams in NBA history. Their story, it's a testament to grit, determination, and just playing with your heart in your sleeve.
Okay, but let's fast forward to today. Could a team like the Bad Boys, could they thrive in today's NBA?
That's a great question.
The game is so different now. It's faster. It's more focused on three-pointers. And that physical style, I mean, would it even be allowed?
It's fascinating to think about, isn't it? Their brand of basketball, with that emphasis on physicality, on defense, would it translate to the modern game? The rules have changed. The game is more offensive-minded. Would their defense be considered too aggressive, too many fouls waiting to happen? I don't know. There's no easy answer.
I mean, yeah, the league's really cracked down on excessive physicality over the years. And the Pistons, well, they were known for pushing those boundaries. But their defense, it wasn't just about brute force, was it?
No, absolutely not. There was a deep understanding of strategy, a level of teamwork that was just incredible. It was about anticipating the opponent's moves, shutting them down before they even got started.
So are you saying that even though the rules are different, the core principles of their defense, those could still be effective?
I think so, yeah. The fundamentals of good defense, things like communication, positioning, hustle, those are timeless.
Yeah.
And the Pistons, they were masters of those fundamentals.
So maybe it's not about copying their exact style, but about taking those core principles and adapting them to the modern game.
I think that's the key, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Adapt it. Imagine a team today with that same defensive intensity, that same unwavering commitment to teamwork, and that never-say-die attitude. They might not be able to hand check like the Pistons did, but they could still disrupt offenses, force turnovers, and create chaos.
It's like their legacy. It isn't just about the championships or the physicality. It's about that belief in the power of teamwork and defense, finding a way to win no matter what.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
They showed the league that a team that plays together, defends together, and truly believes in each other, they can achieve greatness, even without a superstar leading the charge.
And that's a lesson that's relevant for any team in any era.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, basketball is a team sport. And the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys of Detroit, they embodied that spirit like few others ever have.
We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From their championship runs to those legendary rivalries, their unique style of play, and their lasting impact on the NBA. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
We talked about whether their style could work in today's NBA, but here's another angle. What if a team today fully embraced that bad boys mentality?
Hmm.
The toughness, the grit, the willingness to do whatever it takes to win.
That's interesting.
Would fans embrace that? Would the league allow it? Or would they be seen as villains, too physical, too old school for the modern game?
That's a really thought-provoking question. And I don't think there's a simple answer. It would depend on so many things, the specific players, the coaching style, how much the league is willing to tolerate in terms of physicality.
Right. It's not about advocating for a return to brawls and those hard fouls from the past.
No, of course not.
It's about exploring that line between toughness and sportsmanship, playing with an edge without crossing the line. And that line, well, it's constantly shifting as the game evolves.
Exactly. And, the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys, they definitely made their mark on that conversation.
They did. Their story continues to fascinate and spark debate even decades later.
And that, I think, is the mark of a truly great team. They leave you with questions, something to think about long after the final buzzer. They make you reconsider your assumptions and appreciate the complexity of the game.
All right, so we've explored the Bad Boys era, their rivals, and their impact on the game. But we've got one more piece to consider, their lasting legacy and what it means for basketball today. We'll dive into that after a quick break. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so before the break, we were talking about the Pistons' legacy and how their style might translate to today's game.
Right, and we were kind of debating if a team could pull off that bad boys mentality today, that toughness, that grit.
Yeah, I mean, could they? Would fans even want that? Would the league allow it? It's a really interesting question to think about.
It is. And I think it all comes down to that fine line between playing with an edge and just being dirty.
Yeah, and that line, it seems to be constantly shifting.
It does. What was acceptable back then might not fly today. And honestly, that's probably a good thing.
Definitely. But back to the Pistons, their legacy, it goes beyond those championships, beyond the rivalries. It's about how they changed the game.
Absolutely. They showed the league that you could win with defense, with toughness, with a team-first mentality. They weren't always pretty to watch.
Right.
But man, were they effective.
And that success, it wasn't just about individual talent, was it?
No, not at all. They had some incredible players, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But what set them apart was their commitment to the team, to that system, to defense. Everyone knew their role, and they played it to perfection.
And we can't forget about Coach Chuck Daly, the architect of that system.
Huh.
He knew how to get the best out of those guys, how to instill that discipline and that belief.
Oh, absolutely. Coach Daly, he deserves a ton of credit for their success. And his legacy, it extends far beyond Detroit.
Right, coaching the Dream Team in '92, that's a pretty big deal.
Huge deal. I mean, he was able to take the biggest egos in basketball and mold them into a cohesive unit.
Which is incredible when you think about it. So I guess what we're saying is the Pistons' legacy, it's not just about wins and losses.
Right, exactly. It's about teamwork. It's about sacrifice. It's about putting the collective good above individual glory.
And that message, it goes way beyond basketball.
Absolutely. It's a life lesson, really.
Okay, so we've talked about their championships, those epic rivalries, their style of play, and now we're talking about their legacy. It's clear that the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys of Detroit, they were a team that challenged conventions, they sparked debate, and they left a lasting impact on the game.
And that impact, it continues to this day, doesn't it? People are still talking about them, still debating their style, their legacy.
It's amazing, right? Decades later, they still have this power to provoke, to make you think about the game in a different way.
And that's the beauty of sports, isn't it? It's a reflection of life with its ups and downs, its heroes and villains, and those moments of brilliance that just stay with you.
And the Pistons, they were a team that embodied all of that.
They did. They made you feel something. Whether you loved them or hated them, you couldn't ignore them.
Well said. Well, that's it for our deep dive into the legacy of the Detroit Pistons. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those conversations going. Welcome back. All right, so we've been talking about this incredible Pistons team, their impact on the game, and really their lasting legacy.
You know, it's funny. We talk about legacy and impact and all that, but for me, it really boils down to one simple question. Could a team like the Bad Boys exist in today's NBA?
That's a good question. It really makes you think, right? I mean, the game has changed so much since their era.
It has. I mean, think about it. The rules, the pace of play, the emphasis on offense, it's all so different now. Could they adapt? Could they still be successful with their style of play?
I don't know. It's tough to say because a big part of their identity was that physicality, that toughness, and the league has really cracked down on that kind of play over the years.
Right, and for good reason, you know.
Yeah,
Player safety is paramount.
absolutely. But it makes you wonder, where's that line between playing tough and playing dirty?
Hmm, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer because that line, it seems to be constantly shifting.
It does. And the Pistons, they definitely pushed that line, maybe even crossed it a few times.
They did. But that's part of what made them so compelling, so controversial. They weren't afraid to be the villains, and sometimes those villains, they make the story a lot more interesting.
They do. And, maybe, just maybe, there's a way to channel that bad boy's spirit, that toughness, that grit in a way that's still effective today. But it would have to be adapted, refined for the modern game.
Right, and that's where coaching comes in. Right, a great coach, they can take those core principles, that intensity, that defensive mindset, and translate it into a system that works within the rules of today's game.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not about encouraging players to go out there and throw elbows and get into brawls.
No, no, not at all. It's about playing with an edge, about that never back down mentality.
And honestly, who doesn't love a team that plays with passion and heart? I mean, fans love to root for the underdog, but they also love to see a team that leaves it all out on the court.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where you're playing tough, you're playing smart, but you're not crossing the line.
Right. And that line, it's always moving. It's a conversation that's constantly evolving. And, the Pistons, they definitely made their mark on that conversation.
They did. Their legacy continues to fascinate and spark debate even decades later.
I think that's the mark of a truly great team, isn't it? They leave you with questions, something to think about long after the final buzzer. They make you reconsider your assumptions and appreciate the complexity of the game.
Well said. Well, folks, that just about wraps up our deep dive into the legacy of the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys of Detroit.
We've talked about their championships, their rivalries, their style of play, and most importantly, what their story means for the game today.
A team that challenged conventions, sparked debate, and left an undeniable mark on the NBA.
They showed us that there's no single formula for success, that defense wins championships, and that sometimes it's okay to be the villain.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep those conversations going, keep exploring, and keep learning.
And remember, in basketball, as in life, it's not always about who scores the most points, but about who makes the biggest impact. We'll see you next time.